here. Here. Let's see. Is anybody else that's joined? Okay. All right. So something I wanted to just point out, and I apologize that this is not as finished as I want it to be. My plan is to continue to work on this afternoon. As I was preparing my lecture notes for today, I have to be honest, I felt a little uninspired as I was reading through the textbook. Has anybody else been feeling a little uninspired from the textbook in the last couple of weeks? To be honest, I have been. So I am tossing out the textbook for next week. What we are going to do instead, and this is where I'm apologizing, I'm kind of doing this on the fly, and I should have done this earlier when I started to, I have to be honest, the discrimination and affirmative action should have been a hint. That it felt like a slog, and I should have taken that as a direction, and I have to apologize to you that I didn't. So instead, what we are going to do for next week is I have posted, and I probably need to turn on the monitor here. I have posted a series of 4 short videos. 4 for Tuesday, 4 for Thursday. Each one of these videos introduces briefly an ethical quandary. Okay, so basically we are going to be doing case study discussions next week. And this is where I apologize that I did not do this earlier. I should have, and I apologize. First of all, it's a whole heck of a lot more interesting. And second of all, I think it gives us more opportunity to discuss, debate, and practice what we're talking about in this class than, I have to be honest, the textbook has. And I hope you will be forgiving in your course evaluations when you get to this section. All right, so here's what we're going to be talking about. So what this means, or what I hope that you take this to mean, is that next week we are going to be doing small group discussions. We're going to be doing breakout rooms, okay? So if you come to class, you'll be in a breakout group. Otherwise, I'm going to put you into separate breakout groups online, and you'll spend some time discussing these things, okay? So here are the 4 that we're going to be talking about on Tuesday. Branding and facts and creating desires. Mobile phones versus toilets in India. And it's a debate, and this has a little bit to do with what we studied today about advertising, right? And the impact or ethical challenges related to advertising. Advertisers persuading people that they need to spend money on a cell phone even while they lack proper sanitation. In a world where no one has everything they want, is there anything wrong with shaping what people do want? How do we make decisions? And what role does advertising have in people choosing to get certain products over others? Is there an ethical responsibility? This is going to introduce that, and we're going to engage in a debate about it. Okay, captive customers. A required text is customized, extra expensive, and a kickback strategy for a university English department. Now, I can say for certain that doesn't happen at ISU, but there are people who could argue that does happen in the communications department. Every student is required to purchase the ISU communications textbook, the speech textbook. Is there a kickback? I can't say. But is there a challenge when the textbook you're required to buy is one that is produced by a department that gets a financial benefit from requiring you to use it? What are the ethics there? Cooking a resume. Television chef Robert Irvine embellished his resume to get a job at the Food Network. For example, he claimed that he made the cake for Princess Diana and Prince Charles's wedding. Had nothing to do with it. He just totally lied. As a result, it came out that he lied and he was fired. Then the Food Network came back and rehired him. Is there ethical limits to misrepresentation on resumes? This is a question that is relevant to you because you will soon be writing resumes. And then finally, rank and yank. In rank and yank management, employees are ranked and the bottom 10% are fired regardless of their performance. The idea being to open slots for new employees that might perform better. What are some of the ethical quandaries related to that practice? Okay, now here's where I was apologizing that this is, I've got the videos. The videos are live, ready to be watched. What I don't have kind of written up yet is exactly what do I want you to come to class being ready to discuss. And the reason that's important is because I want to use these activities here as a prep and practice for our final exam, which hopefully this doesn't freak you out, is in 2 weeks. Well, 3 weeks if you want to be technical. Please, Josh is already going pale. So I want to practice this. I want to give you opportunities to make sure that you feel comfortable. If you're given an ethical situation like this, what am I going to ask you to do on the final exam? I want to practice that by using these as examples. I have the final exam prep document ready, but that was written for the final exam, and I want to tweak that so that it's relevant to these. Does that make sense to everybody? So that should be ready by this afternoon. Realistically speaking, I doubt many of you are going to get to this because what else is happening this weekend? What happens on Sunday?
We turn in our case studies.
You're turning in your case studies. So my gut feeling is nobody cares about next week and getting videos watched. Your focus right now is getting this assignment done. But I just want you to know that my hope is to have the guide for these ready by this afternoon. Okay? Is that okay with everybody? Does anybody have any comments, concerns, questions? Oh, hell no's? Anything?
So just to clarify, you want us to be prepared to talk about all 4 of these ethical
Videos. Yep. So for example, for those numbers I think are those numbers right? The 16th? Okay, I need to check on the due date then because I think the due date is wrong for the case study paper. Is it set for the 15th? I want to make sure that it's the right date. Okay. So then November 16th is a Monday, which is a little, I need to change these dates. These are the ones that are wrong. Okay, I will get there, folks, I promise. Okay, but yes, so for the 17th on Tuesday, please watch these 4 videos. And then refer to the guide as to what kinds of things am I going to expect you to be able to discuss for each one of these 4 videos. You'll be doing this in small groups.
So we don't have to have them actually answer on paper, just mentally, this is prepared.
I'm ready to, I could talk about this intelligently, about these things, these aspects of it. Nothing formal, you're not turning anything in. Yeah. Okay, and then we're going to have 4 additional videos for Thursday. Is everybody cool with this? Anybody have any questions? Okay. Does anybody have any additional questions about the case study paper that is due on Sunday? This is kind of speak now or forever hold your peace kind of time.
So my Revel's being kind of weird, and whenever I open it, it only lets me open it to the first page, and then I can't look up any pages. I have to just click next page until I get to the page that I want to be at. Have you seen that like with anybody else before?
That's how I've experienced the textbook. It is incredibly inconvenient. And it's a reason why next semester I am not using this textbook again.
Okay.
I think
Nuts.
if it goes back to contents, it lists the chapters one by one. I used to do it that way, but I discovered if you go back to the main menu and then you use contents instead, it's easier.
It gets you at least a little bit closer to the section you want to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a reason why I am abandoning this text next semester. First of all, because the cost, which I think to be unreasonable, and second of all, because the navigation inside the system is not good. Okay?
Dr. Lambert, would you be having your office hours tomorrow?
I normally would, but I am going to be having a faculty meeting that I have to run, so I won't be available. But if you want to email me a time that would work for you, I will see if I can put it into my schedule. Any other questions? Justin?
When are we also required, or when are we required to answer the questions for the case studies?
Great question. Okay, so you're responsible to do the case studies, or those have to be turned in. You have to post, or so you turn in your case study to me and turn it in, and then you copy and paste it to the forum by the 15th. So it's that same Sunday. Okay, you then have a week to respond to the case studies. So the 22nd, or actually commenting will be open until Wednesday, November 25th. I gave you a couple of extra days. So basically they are due by Wednesday, the end of class. The 24th will be our last day of class, but I'm giving you until Wednesday at midnight to post your response. Just because I have a feeling everybody is going to be totally slammed with end of the semester, especially with a shortened semester like what we have. I'm trying to give you as much time to fit this in with all of the other assignments that you have. Okay, so papers due Sunday. A copy of it in the discussion board is due this Sunday. You then have 10 days to comment on 3 of your peers or classmates' case studies. Does that work for everybody?
So we're copying and pasting it, or posting it as a worksheet?
You can either post it as an attachment or just copy and paste whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. It's just so that everybody has access to what you wrote. Anybody else? Josh?
Do you want our work cited and everything in the forum post?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just easy just to copy and paste the whole thing.
Okay.
Anything else?
How soon will the videos from Tuesday be up?
One more time.
The class video from Tuesday, when will they be up?
That will get taken care of this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yep.
My case study essay is currently like 1,400 words. Is that okay, or should I make it closer to 1,200?
Oh my goodness. 1,400? I do believe you are going to have to be whipped with a wet noodle for 1,400 words. It will get ugliness. Joking, that'll be fine. 1,400 is fine. The thing is that I do not want this to become a major writing project that goes on for pages. Okay? Our goal is to make this readable and condensed for our audience. So 1,400 is fine, but let's not go crazy, is what I would say. Anybody else? Anything else?
Would you like outside resources for our responses or no?
No. That's above and beyond what I would expect for this. So for example, when we're looking at those responses, if you look at these sections in red, so for example, and I hope nobody in this class is colorblind, I apologize if you are. But for example, where it says your response should be at least one paragraph in length and provide justification or evidence to support your claim, that is not talking about outside information. Where should the evidence or justification come from? From the case, what did they say that leads you to this conclusion or this opinion? The case study is the evidence. So there is no need to be reading outside of the case study. Now, what happens if I say that there isn't good evidence in the case study, or that it's a poorly written case study? Does that hurt the person that wrote the case study? No, that's separate, right? They'll get their grade for the case study itself. But honest feedback, good, bad, or ugly, does not further help or hurt their grade. One is about your ability to write a case study yourself. The other is your ability to read, interpret, and analyze the writing of other people. They are completely divorced from each other. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, one last thing that I do want to tell you. The week after Thanksgiving, remember, the school will be closed after Thanksgiving, meaning we will not be holding classes. Our final exam, at least for this course, will be held online. The way I'm going to do the final exam, it will be online, it will be open book, open notes. It will be much like the midterm exam in that you will be given a series of different predetermined essay prompts that you will analyze. Okay, the exam will start on Monday, November 30th. It will be open until December 6th. You can spend as much or as little time as you desire on the exam. There will be no time limit, other than it must be turned in by November 6th. Okay, again, I want to be able to work around the other courses and final exams you'll be taking. Okay, does anybody have any questions or concerns about that?
You meant December 6th, right?
That's what I thought. Did I not say December 6th?
No, you said November.
Oh, November 30th through December 6th. I apologize. Anything else? Okay. Well, then let's jump in for today, and let's continue to look at questions related to the practice of advertising and the responsibility of manufacturers. So we're going to continue with a little bit of this idea of the contractual view. Remind me what the contractual view, what does that mean? What is the contractual view?
And like the customer agrees to purchase whatever product it is, so technically they have the same knowledge as to if a product is good or not.
Okay, exactly. The idea is the responsibility or the ethical responsibility for care is shared between two individuals. Who are the two groups or entities involved in the contractual view?
The
One of them was
buyer
the
and the seller.
customer, the buyer and the seller. The buyer is expected to understand what they're getting into and to be able to make a decision with freedom and full intent, right? I understand what I'm getting into. I'm capable of making this decision, and I agree to the risks embedded in this relationship. What is the contractual view of the manufacturer or the seller? What ethical responsibilities does the seller have?
Let them know any risks.
Here, I'm going to give you full disclosure and full information as to the state and nature of this product. What else?
You have to guarantee it's effective, the product works.
That it will function as advertised, that it is capable of functioning as advertised, and if used correctly, will deliver the results that the person expects. Okay? Anything else?
Possibly the risks.
Okay, they need to disclose any, yeah, Josh had talked about this idea that they disclose any risks in terms of defects or risks of use. The buyer has to be fully informed about the nature of the product. Okay, and so on class on Tuesday, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the contractual perspective. So today, or a couple of things that I wanted to close that we didn't get to on Tuesday was one of the things that manufacturers or sellers can do is to include what? Subtle hint, it's at the very top of the screen. What can I include as a part of my contract? Oop. Guess I can't highlight that. Let's try it this way. What can I include?
Disclaimers.
Disclaimers. What are disclaimers?
They're basically, they let you know the risks involved, but it's just written on there, often like small text or, and you know, subsides like in drug commercials where it's just quickly set up.
This product can cause blah, 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 blah.
It's written microscopic at the bottom of the screen or even on the pill bottles themselves.
Okay? But what does a disclaimer do? What does it limit?
Because you gave the consumer the knowledge of the risks. It is the consumer's, I don't know what word you should implement there, but it's the consumer's responsibility to.
Yes, the idea of disclaimers, or the problem with disclaimers, is it nullifies any expectation of a warranty or promise existing between the seller and the buyer. Anybody here ever gone shopping for a used car? Anybody ever seen on the sticker on the window a statement about warranty and then it has a big X and says as is? What does as is mean?
Means you buy it as it is. If moment you pay for it, the dealership isn't responsible for whatever is wrong with it.
Exactly. It is a statement that disclaims any responsibility for any problems or defects in the car because the seller agrees to buy the car as it now stands without expectation of redress if, for example, 5 miles after you drive it off the lot, the transmission falls out. Now, the challenge, what might be the danger inherent in the use of disclaimers? It's a very common practice. excuse me, go for it.
Not explicitly informing the consumer and presuming that they will understand the risks is read.
Okay,
And just nullifies their responsibility in the matter.
okay, it nullifies the manufacturer, but they don't have to necessarily make sure that the person understands the significance or the ramifications of certain disclaimers, right? I can hide the significance in the language that I use. Okay, what else? There any other dangers with this? Are there any protections that could be implemented to protect the buyer in these kinds of situations?
Protect the buyer against disclaimers.
Uh-huh.
Well, credit cards could be a good example of that, where they require the writing in it to be clear and explicit and large enough to be able to be read.
Okay.
And so that people can more easily understand what is involved in the credit card and debt.
Perfect. That's a great example. Anybody else?
Would like an example of a disclaimer be, for example, we bought a generator for farm, and a disclaimer on it was we needed so many horsepower in the tractor to run it. Is that an example of like?
Well, that's what a disclaimer is, right? But the thing is that a lot of times disclaimers, that unless you are as well versed in the subject as the manufacturer, those disclaimers don't mean anything. You don't understand what they mean or what they signify. They tend to be written in legal terminology because the intent is to exonerate the manufacturer from lawsuits. So it's written by an attorney so that the attorney can say, here's what we are and are not liable for. It puts them, so because most consumers do not have access to legal representation every time you buy and open something, it really puts the buyer in a compromised position. We don't understand, cannot interpret what these terms mean, yet we are held accountable for them.
Well, even going further than that, you can look at some third world countries where you have these bigger businesses move in, and even if they spell the disclaimer in plain writing, they could be illiterate or not understanding what kind of risk that could be involved.
Okay. How many of you have brought a software product and you install it and then it says, do you agree to the terms of use? How many of you have ever we've all clicked on, I hereby understand and certify that I agree to the terms of use. How many of you have ever actually read every word of a term of use statement? Anybody? Okay, Josh has. Josh is the 1 in 300 million in the United States that has actually read a term of use. Most of us don't. Why is that a problem or a concern based on this, what we're talking about right here? By saying that I agree to the terms of use, what have I done?
You forfeited your rights, and you forfeited your rights over on the product just because they could sneak anything they want in there and you agree to it.
Okay, it's essentially an additional contract, right? We have the original contract, which was, I pay you money, you give me the product. They have actually now created a second contract, which is what? Not only do I now own it, but now I have to engage in a second contract with them before what? Before I can actually use it. So I can own a product and never agree to the end user agreement. They call it an EUA. I own it, but I can't use it unless I agree to the terms of use. Why would the company put on terms of use? What's it trying to do? And this gets into the due care concept.
They further mitigate their responsibility.
It's trying to mitigate or lessen their responsibility. For example, Facebook tries to present itself as a platform. What does that mean? That it's a platform.
They're simply hosting a site and the people on it are the one like, fully engaged in the website.
Okay, so the idea is the terms of use from Facebook says you can post whatever you want. And we have very specific rules about what can and can't be posted. For example, you cannot post material of a sexually suggestive nature. But other than that, Facebook has you sign that so that they cannot be held liable or responsible if you post something on your site or on their site that could be considered. Exactly, they don't take liability for what's actually posted. Why? Because, for example, there was an instance of a young woman in Massachusetts who befriended this young man and then started to send him texts and Facebook posts encouraging him to kill himself. And she used this product again and again and again until she convinced him, and he got into his Jeep Cherokee, put a hose from the exhaust into the cabin, and committed suicide. She was found guilty of reckless endangerment that led to his death. People said, well, if she's guilty, who else should be guilty? The media services that she used to do it. And they pointed at their end user agreements and said, we were explicit that we are not responsible for how people use our product. They agreed to assume all responsibility. So the young man who killed himself essentially said, I understand that this can be used in a lot of different ways, and I waive any right to hold Facebook or Twitter or whatever accountable. Okay? But so that this idea that I can disclaim as a way of getting out of responsibilities can be incredibly problematic, because most of the time those disclaimers can be written in such a way that very few people can understand. And that leads us to the next one, which is this idea of the contractual view assumes that buyers and sellers are equally skilled at being able to look after their own interests. Is that really true? Okay. One of the things I appreciated reading in the thing today was, did you read the section where the judge says nobody other than a manufacturer can truly appreciate all the technology that goes into how a modern car operates? Especially at the level of computerization that exists within the normal car, nobody outside of highly trained mechanics or manufacturers can truly appreciate the nature of what goes into making a car work. Why is that significant, if that statement is true? If nobody but a mechanic or a manufacturer can understand how a car works, how does that relate to this concept of the contractual view?
Then the manufacturer and the buyer don't have equal knowledge on the product?
Exactly. There is no human way that we as consumers can possibly know everything that we need to know. And they're saying that's just one thing. Nobody understands how a microwave works, per se. You cannot look at a microwave, and unless you are a manufacturer of that product, it's very unlikely that you could examine a microwave and say, oh, the wattage on this is incorrect. the voltage or amperage required for this is wrong, and this thing is going to explode if I plug it into my current electrical system in my house. Would you agree with that? Sure. But that kind of stuff happens all the time, doesn't it? People buy microwaves, plug them in, and discover, to their regret, that the electrical system is inadequate and it starts a fire. Okay. So because of that, there is another philosophy about consumer safety and product selling, which is called the what? The do care concept. What is the do care view of selling? What does it argue? The contractual view goes off of the Latin phrase caveat emptor, which means
Let the buyer beware.
let the buyer beware. Okay, do care introduces the concept of caveat vendor. And what does that mean, Christy?
Let the seller beware.
Let the seller beware. And what does the do care concept or perspective suggest? Contractual says, go for it.
Since like the manufacturer has so much knowledge and expertise on the product, they are more responsible and have to take a special care to ensure that the consumer is safe using the product.
Okay, so the idea is caveat vendor means the seller better beware because they are going to be held they're going to be held to a higher standard in the warranty section. That they aren't going to just simply say, well, you bought the product and we included the user guide. They're going to make the argument that's not enough. Because, why, Richard?
Because they have so much more knowledge than the consumer about the product.
Therefore, that they are held to a higher standard of making sure that reasonable use of the product is unlikely to cause damage or injury. Okay? Now, as it says here, according to the do care view, manufacturers or producers exercise sufficient care only when they take adequate steps to prevent whatever injurious effects they can foresee that the use of their product may have on consumers until or after having conducted inquiries into the ways the product will be used and after having attempted to anticipate possible misuses of the product. What is that statement saying? What is the new responsibility of the manufacturer? They don't just get to produce the product and say, here's what we know. What else do they have to do?
It gets back to your analogy with the microwave, that if they know the microwave requires this much wattage or whatever, that they themselves will test it to make sure that any household, no matter how much electricity is in that house, it will adequately function without causing a fire. They have to be able to foresee that it's going to be used appropriately in all circumstances.
They have to understand, okay, when they take adequate steps to prevent whatever injurious effects they can foresee that the use of their products may have on consumers. Okay, that's what they have to address. Anything that could cause injury only after first they have to conduct inquiries into the way the product will be used and anticipating misuses of it. So it's not just, okay, so for example, the maker of a can of whipped cream. Let's think Ready Whip, right? It comes in the aerosol can. There is a very specific intended use for that aerosol can of whipped cream, right? What is it? What is the intended use of a can of aerosolized whipped cream? And I got that out.
Putting it on food on a plate.
Okay, it's intended to distribute whipped cream in such a way so that it becomes fluffy and it can be used in an edible manner. Is that the only way that people actually use it? No. Okay. My kid decides that the application site is not on a piece of food, but directly into his mouth. Right? We're not going to get into that. But they have to not only understand how people would use it and how they could be injured using it correctly, what else do they have to figure out?
Possible misuses.
How are people likely to misuse it? Okay? And how can we either A, warn people against that, or how can we design our products so that it will not be misused that way? One of the most common things that people might do with a can of used aerosol whipped cream, if you take it on a camping trip, what might you be tempted to do? You've used the whipped cream, it's gone.
Throw it in the fire.
Throw it in the fire. Okay, now can I stop people? What's going to happen if well, let's just talk about this reasonably. What is most likely to happen if I put an aerosol can, even if it's empty, into a fire?
Boom.
I will get to study the scientific effects of combustion. And hopefully not the traumatic the experiences of being hit by flying shrapnel from said combustion. Now, can Ready Whip prevent people from putting that can in the fire? Probably not. But in response to the due care clause or due care perspective, what am I likely to see printed several places throughout all over that can of Ready Whip?
Can is flammable.
That is flammable. Please do not please do not discard in a fire. Please do not place this object in a fire or next to a fire. Contents under pressure, contents can explode. This is a direct reflection. Those warnings are a direct reflection of due care process. The recognition that I'm not just telling you how to use this product safely, but that I've had to go and figure out ways you might use it unsafely and try to protect you from yourself.
So then who draws, and this is just, I guess more of a rhetoric, but who draws a line between when you can do something about it and when you should just put a warning? For instance, the aerosol can, they have rubber bottoms that you can put on, where if they're under a certain pressure, it'll just pull out the bottom and not cause much damage. But it's more expensive to do that. So when is the line between disclaimer and, actual action against it written in the due care kind of process?
That's a fantastic question. What do you think?
It's just something to think about, I guess.
Well, the honest truth, it's based on court precedent of is a written, and it's basically based off of court decisions in the past about what was considered reasonable and what was considered unreasonable in terms of responsibility for a manufacturer. Okay. But this is why, for example, have you guys ever seen for example, there is a warning on my lawnmower that has pictures of all these things you're not supposed to do with it, right? And it has a picture with a big red X with a person sticking their fingers up into the blades, and it shows the fingertips being cut off. Why do you think that they put that there? Because somebody has done it. Which makes, when you think about some of the warnings, it makes you realize every single one of those warnings comes either because the manufacturer has a Darwin Award department. What are the stupid possible things that somebody could do with our product? Let's try to anticipate and warn people against them. And so it's either a Darwin Award group, Darwin Award being this idea that people do incredibly stupid things, and like the guy who tied weather balloons to a lawn chair because he wanted to try to fly. Really happened. He was stuck in there and they couldn't figure out how to get him down because he was too high up. I don't believe that he actually survived. Okay, but the Darwin Awards are given to people who die in incredibly stupid or foolish ways. Companies have people like this that work for their companies whose entire job is to try to figure out the ways that somebody could misuse their product to determine, can we warn somebody against this or do we need to design it? What's the challenge in requiring people to design things? For example, you talked about aerosol cans being coated in rubber so that if there is an explosion, it will be in a certain direction that's less likely to cause injury. What's the cost associated with that? What problem does that bring up?
Well, especially in that case, it's an entire new line of supply that you need to get.
Okay, number one, I have to completely replace all of my product because I have to roll out the new design and somehow get back all of these others that would now be considered defective. Okay, what else?
It adds waste. Rubber's not great for the environment.
Okay, it adds waste from both a manufacturing perspective, but also the cost of getting all of the old product back and putting out the new product. The design of that product or the new design plus the materials, where does that cost go? It goes into the product itself and essentially onto the consumer. Now, in some cases, for example, everybody would want the new rubber coated can. But do I have the option? Do I have the ability to say, you know what? I'm smart enough to know not to put my aerosol cans in the fire. I'd like to buy unrubberized aerosol cans because it's $3 cheaper. I'm smart enough to use it safely as it was intended. Why do I have to buy the rubberized version? And this gets back to utilitarianism of utility, right? Efficiency. And saying that the company is responsible is going to likely dramatically increase cost, right? Figuring out all the stupid ways people use things, that costs money, it costs time. And if I decide that, man, I have to change my product because there's a stupid person that might possibly drop their hairdryer in the bathtub. Now, please somebody explain to me who actually uses a hairdryer while they are standing in a bathtub. It must have happened because I've seen pictures that have that image X'd out. Okay, must be a really, really small bathroom. And I have seen those. Justin, you were just saying something.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, I think this kind of just goes off this, same idea that we see in both that Ford case with the gas tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And the same case with the McDonald's and coffee, is that, you know, the company kind of just weighs, I guess, lawsuit cost versus the cost of just doing that.
And if it happens to one, you can assume that all of the other companies will respond to anticipate the possible cost. Now, this comes back to the Ford question, right? Realistically, Ford said, look, it is going to cost $72 more to purchase a Pinto if we fix it than if we don't. And since most customers would not intend on getting a rear impact over a certain mileage that would cause this explosion to happen, why should we pass that cost onto consumers? It seems pretty horrific, but it makes a lot of sense when we talk about the regular cost of goods and how expensive it can be if certain products have to be recalled or remade and things like that. Now, it goes on to say, for example, that a car manufacturer would be morally negligent only if it had allowed unreasonable dangers to remain in the design of the car. That is, dangers that consumers cannot be expected to know about or cannot guard on against their own.
So this is just something that came up with my mind when I was reading all this is, Like right now, one thing that a lot of car companies especially are doing to like mitigate their responsibility is recalls. Now
Yes,
they can just put out these recalls and yeah, it costs them money to fix it, but the percentage of people that actually go in for the recalls is relatively low
yes.
on a lot of things. So they're like, well, we provide a fix, but they know that not everyone is going to do it. So it, you know, it saves them money in the long run because they don't even have to pay the full price of fixing it with the recalls.
This is one of the lessons that was learned from the Ford Pinto case, is that recalls can be a great way to mitigate or lessen the moral responsibility of the manufacturer without actually having to do very much. Like you said, very few times will people actually get the recall and get it sent in. Contrary to the belief of this extended car warranty, whatever it is that's robocalling everybody. Has anybody else gotten these, by the way? Okay, it's insane. But we get them all the time. But they realize that it's a cheap way because most people won't take them up on it, but that way in a court of law, they can say, we offered it, we communicated it, they chose not to get it, therefore it's on them. Now, this is all good and well in a situation, for example, with a product like a vehicle, where there is a tangible good that can be repaired. But there are a lot of things that we buy where that's not the case, where there isn't a physical good that could be fixed. So for example, education. So let's replace manufacturer with teacher or school. Let's say school district. A school district would be morally negligent only if it allowed unreasonable dangers to remain in the design of the curriculum. That is, dangers that students cannot be expected to know about or cannot guard against on their own. So this is very easy to talk about when we talk about cars, right? But how do we deal with this when it comes to doctors or chiropractors, right? Sports medicine practitioners or nurses. What do we do, or how do we protect when there's no physical good that could be fixed? I mean, you guys walked into this class. What is your assumption when you took this class? You made a couple of assumptions, didn't you? What are some of the expectations you have of me as an instructor?
We won't be given false information.
Okay, I should know what I'm talking about. Great example. Are you going to be able to tell me whether or not I know what I'm talking about or not? Well, I use a textbook, and so there's a way to at least compare what I'm saying versus what the textbook is saying. That's one possible way. But very quickly, the language and content of that textbook can really get into the deep end. What are some other things that would protect you from bad education? Justin?
A healthy learning environment.
Is this a place that allows for questions, for disputes, for clarifications? Okay. I am not a perfect teacher. You're all pretty probably aware of that. I try to acknowledge my shortcomings when they happen. Probably not that great at it, but I try. Okay, but if I created a manipulative or a coercive environment, that could help you to understand that you might be getting poor information. Anything else?
I mean,
Okay.
maybe not so much with teachers, but with other professions, training can be a big safeguard.
Okay. The idea that, for example, the training I get in other places can be compared to the training I'm getting in this, right? But the idea is that the promises of due care are great when we have physical products that can be changed or modified. It becomes much more difficult when we have intangible products. Okay? So this is not necessarily a question we can answer, But it does beg the question, who then is to bear the cost of injuries sustained from products whose defects neither the manufacturer nor the consumer could have uncovered beforehand? This is a classic example. They mention, for example, asbestos in the textbook. You cannot turn on the TV these days without hearing about some kind of mesothelioma lawsuit, right? What's the problem with those lawsuits, according to this?
The manufacturer didn't know about the two negatives when initially noticing asbestos.
Okay, the folks that were using asbestos for years did not know about the nature of asbestos and the danger that it posed. As soon as they did, what happened? If I discovered that asbestos caused this kind of stuff to happen, it caused cancer, what was my moral responsibility if I knew that it caused harm? What should I immediately do? I should stop using it, and if possible, and where possible, what should I do?
Destroy it.
Remove it and destroy it correctly. Okay? Problem is, that can be incredibly expensive. For example, the Roy F. Christensen building, the building that some of us are in right now, has asbestos in this building. Why are we still here if we know that it has asbestos in this building? Why haven't we destroyed this thing?
Because the risk is minimal if you're not directly exposed to it.
Okay, because we've been able to mitigate the exposure to it, the way it was used, it's covered so that it cannot contaminate the area unless I make significant structural changes to the building. As long as I leave the building alone, it's still safe. Okay? So, the idea of all these mesothelioma lawsuits are coming from places that continued to use or did not mitigate asbestos risk after they discovered that it was there. But it does beg the question, well, who's responsible for it if the manufacturer didn't know that this was a problem and the consumers didn't realize it was a problem? I don't have an answer for it, but it's a pretty important question. All right. Last thing I want to cover just really quick, and this was just a statement that I thought was really interesting, and this talks about the idea of advertising, which is what? What are we talking about with advertising? What is advertising according to the textbook?
Information about a product passed on to the consumer.
Nice, exactly. It is information passed on from the manufacturer to the consumer. Right? That is the justification for why advertising is allowed. It is a way of the manufacturer sharing information so that the consumer can be informed, right? What does the textbook say the problem is with advertising? The majority of advertising does not contain what? Somebody online.
Any actual information.
It doesn't contain information. It isn't, for example, if I think about the Carl's Jr. hamburger ads with, what was her name? Paris Hilton, where Paris Hilton is sitting there wearing a string bikini and is eating this Carl's Jr. hamburger so that the barbecue sauce is dripping all over her semi-naked body. What information are they trying to pass on to the consumer? One could make the argument that they're saying, hey, did you know that we make this double stacked barbecue hamburger that's really juicy? Is that what they're really trying to communicate in that advertisement? Hell no. And that's what they're talking about in the textbook. The problem with advertising is that the majority of advertising tends to fall into the area of deceptive advertising, which means what? What would deceptive advertising be?
Saying something that's explicitly untrue about your product.
Number one, something that is explicitly untrue about my product. That happens. But most deceptive advertising is advertising that is meant to imply or to affect us in ways other than simply informing us so that we can make an informed decision about the thing. So, for example, have you ever noticed the number of commercials for food dramatically increases after 8 p.m. in the evening? You will see many more fast food advertisements that start after 8 o'clock. Does anybody know why?
It's when people are hungry.
Because they are tired, the brain tends to start craving carbohydrates more after 8 o'clock. Therefore, Taco Bell, for example, created an entire menu that is only available after 9 o'clock. So did Jack in the Box. Why? Because they knew that if they started advertising certain kinds of food after 9 o'clock, people would be more likely to go out and get it. So they created carb-intensive menus that were only available at those times. Because they knew that they could engage in deception. We're letting you know that we're selling this. That's their argument, right? That's information. But they're displaying food in such a way to trigger the brain so that the person could make the argument that my late night cravings are such that I cannot make an informed decision about whether or not I want to buy Taco Bell or not. It's one of the reasons I lock my keys up at night. I joke. Okay? But one of the interesting things about advertisement that this said is that production is not molded to serve human desires. Rather, human desires are molded to serve the needs of production. What does that mean?
Means they are using human desires to their own advantage.
Exactly. The idea is supposed to be manufacturers communicate to buyers, here's what I have to sell, and the consumers get to decide, here's what I need. Right? And what should really happen is, if consumers said, here's what I need, manufacturers should react to, here's what people want. What this is saying is, it's not about what we want, it's about here's what we have to sell, so I'm going to convince you or train your brain to simply buy whatever it is I have to sell, whether you need it or not. Apple is great at this, right? Every single year, what tends to happen? We have a brand new iPhone that comes out. So Apple is focused on trying to convince us why we need to buy the new product rather than whether or not that's what we really want or need. Why? Why is that? Why is this significant? Why is this important? Somebody online. Why is it important, this idea that production or human desires are molded to serve the needs of production rather than production being molded to meet the needs of human desires?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily important, but one could argue they always want to make profits. So.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to pick on McDonald's for a second, just because it's easy, right? McDonald's exists to make a profit. They have discovered certain ways of producing certain kinds of food that are easily produced and have a high profit margin. Okay, meaning French fries, for example, and soda. The cost of soda is pennies on the dollar. So their large cup of Coke, for example, costs on average 5 cents to make. considering the amount of syrup and soda that it requires to make a cup of soda, costs 5 cents. How much does it cost the consumer? $1. What does that mean? They're making 95 cents of profit every time they sell a cup of soda. That being the case, even though my need as a human being is to eat better, more healthy food, you ever notice better, healthy food costs more than fast food? So my question is, this kind of proves this idea. Look at how many fast food places are out there that are selling food that is not healthy but is profitable compared to how many restaurants that make healthy food that tends to be more expensive. It's much more difficult to keep healthy restaurants open. We haven't figured out how to make healthy food profitable. It's crazy. It costs more to buy a salad at McDonald's than any other product on their menu. What should be the cheapest, most commonly bought thing is the hardest, but it's because production is not designed to meet our needs. In fact, we are molded to meet the needs of production. It's kind of a cynical view, but it's true. Yes?
Have you seen the Super Size Me 2 movie?
I haven't seen the second one. I saw the first one. I used to make my students watch it.
The second one's definitely worth a watch because it talks about this exactly, about advertisement and how, he goes through and he makes his own restaurant and the same thing where he shows all the different things that restaurants do to advertise, even in the store itself, like the different kinds of lights they use.
Yep.
And kind of advertising how it molds people to be a consumer instead of them providing something that people would initially want.
Right.
And that's what this is.
Okay, so that's everything I've got for today. Folks, like I said, I'm gonna have the videos linked this afternoon, Daniel. And I will have the guide for the videos ready by this afternoon. Like I said, I don't expect anybody to take a look at it immediately, but please be ready for Tuesday. We won't have time to watch the videos in class. So make sure that you watch, they are all pretty short. But I'd like you to watch them and become ready to discuss them in class on Tuesday.